Hello everyone, this is Silent Rain, and I'm here to help you relax. If you're using this video to unwind or fall asleep, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Before we start, let me know, where are you watching from and what time is it? Now settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we embark on a story together. I checked every room upstairs, then went down to the first floor. Everything was locked. The alarm system showed no signs of entry, but I knew what I'd heard. I spent the rest of the night in the living room, with every light on, the bat across my lap, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house settling. Morning came eventually. In the harsh light of day, I felt foolish, stress and isolation playing tricks on my mind. That's all it was. I needed to get out more. Maybe start dating again. I called in sick to work and spent the day installing more security cameras, adding motion sensors, and replacing the old locks with heavy-duty deadbolts. The hardware store clerk gave me odd looks as he rang up my purchases, but I didn't care. That night, I double-checked every lock, tested every camera, and went to bed with the bat propped against my nightstand. I left the bedside lamp on. Sleep came in fits and starts. Every sound jolted me awake. The furnace kicking on, branches scratching against the windows, the ice maker dropping cubes. At exactly 2:07 a.m., the laughter started again. This time, it came from inside my closet. The sound was different now, still wet and gurgling, but with a new edge to it, almost hungry. I lay frozen in bed, staring at the closet door. It was closed, but I could see movement in the gap underneath, something shifting in the darkness beyond. The laughter grew louder, more insistent. The door began to vibrate slightly in its frame. I grabbed the bat and my phone, backing toward my bedroom door. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped both. The closet door started to open. I ran down the hallway, taking the stairs two at a time, nearly falling in my panic. The laughter followed, echoing off the walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I made it to the kitchen, fumbling with my car keys. I had to get out. Had to. The laughter stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard something wet hitting the floor behind me. Slow, heavy drops. Drip, drip, drip. I turned around. The kitchen was empty, but there on the floor were dark, glistening spots leading from the doorway to where I stood. I touched one with trembling fingers. It was warm and sticky. The laughter erupted again, right next to my ear, hot, wet breath on my neck. I ran out of the house in my pajamas, jumped in my car, and drove. I didn't stop until I reached the 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The fluorescent lights and smell of coffee helped calm my racing heart. The elderly waitress didn't bat an eye at my appearance. She just poured me a cup of coffee and left me alone in my booth. I spent the rest of the night there, planning my next move. I couldn't go back to the house, not alone, but who would believe me? When dawn broke, I called Mike, my oldest friend from college, who lived a few hours away. He was a contractor who'd helped me fix up the house when I first moved in. "I need your help," I said when he answered. "Something's wrong with the house." Mike arrived that afternoon. He listened to my story without interrupting, then helped me do a thorough inspection of the house. We checked every corner, crawl space, and vent. Found nothing. "Could be raccoons in the walls," he suggested. "They can make some weird noises." I didn't bother arguing. How could I explain the wet footprints, the breath on my neck? Mike agreed to stay a few days to help figure things out. We set up camping cots in the living room. Safety in numbers. The first night passed quietly. So did the second. On the third night, at exactly 2:07 a.m., the laughter started again. It woke us both. Mike sat up on his cot, eyes wide. "What the hell is that?" The sound came from the kitchen, that horrible wet, gurgling laugh. "You hear it too," I whispered. Mike nodded slowly. "That's not raccoons." We grabbed our phones and the bat, moving toward the kitchen. The laughter grew louder with each step. The kitchen was dark. The motion sensor lights should have activated when we entered, but they remained dead. The laughter seemed to fill the room now, bouncing off the walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Mike fumbled for the light switch. Nothing happened. "Power's out," he said, his voice tight. Our phone lights carved weak circles in the darkness. The beams caught something moving near the ceiling, a darker shadow against the shadows. The laughter stopped. In the sudden silence, we heard something moving across the ceiling. Not footsteps, more like something dragging itself overhead, leaving wet trails behind. A drop of warm liquid hit my shoulder. "Run," Mike said. We bolted for the front door. Last night, I finally forced myself to climb up to the attic. I needed to check the insulation anyway, and I was sick of letting this weird fear control me. I grabbed my flashlight and toolbox and started up the steps. The heat hit me halfway up. My shirt stuck to my back instantly. The pressure came next, so strong I had to grab the railing to keep from stumbling backward. My flashlight beam bounced off dusty boxes and old furniture. The air was thick with decades of accumulated dust. I pushed through the sensation and made it to the top. The attic was huge, running the full length of the house. Boxes and trunks were stacked everywhere, along with sheet-covered furniture and piles of yellowing newspapers. I spotted a box labeled photos and grabbed it, thinking maybe I'd find some old pictures of the house to guide my renovation. The box was full of albums and loose photographs spanning at least 50 years. I brought them downstairs to the kitchen where the light was better. Most were typical family photos, picnics, holidays, birthdays. But then I found one that made my blood run cold. It was a photo of the attic stairs, taken from the hallway below. The image was faded and slightly blurry, probably from the 1970s based on the wood paneling visible on the walls. But what caught my eye was the dark figure standing halfway up the steps. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a problem with the photo. But the more I looked, the more distinct it became. It was definitely human-shaped, but completely black, like a silhouette cut from dark paper. The figure appeared to be facing down toward the camera. My hands started shaking. I dug through the rest of the photos. There were more, many more. Different years, different times of day, different angles. But in every photo of those stairs, that dark figure was there, always in the same spot, always facing down. I found a photo dated 1962 that showed a family gathering. The stairs were visible in the background, and there was the figure, 1975, Martha's birthday party. The figure stood on the stairs behind the celebrating group. 1989, a Christmas morning photo. The figure lurked in the shadows of the stairwell, while children opened presents in the foreground. Some of the photos had notes on the back. Most were just dates and names, but one caught my eye. It was another shot of the stairs, this one from 1983. Martha's handwriting on the back read, "It never leaves that spot. I've learned to live with it." I spent the next few hours spreading photos across the kitchen table, arranging them chronologically. The figure first appeared in photos from 1960, right after Martha moved into the house. It was in every single photo of the stairs taken after that date, always in the same position, always watching. My rational mind tried to find explanations, a trick of light and shadow, a fault in the camera, Martha playing some kind of decades-long prank. But I knew what I'd felt on those stairs, the heat, the pressure, the sensation of being watched. I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. 2 weeks ago, I'd taken some before pictures to document the renovation. I scrolled to the ones I'd taken of the hallway and stairs. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. There it was, the same dark figure in my photos, in my digital 21st century photos. The sound of creaking wood made me jump. It came from upstairs, from the direction of the attic stairs. I sat absolutely still, barely breathing. Another creak, like someone shifting their weight on old boards. The kitchen suddenly felt too exposed. I grabbed the photos and my phone and retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I pushed a chair under the handle for good measure. That was 4 hours ago. I haven't heard any more noises, but I can't sleep. I keep staring at the photos spread across my bed, trying to make sense of them, trying to understand what's been watching me from those stairs. The oldest photos show the house when it was first built in the 1920s. No figure on the stairs, nothing unusual at all. But something changed in 1960. What happened that year? What brought that thing here? I pull up my laptop and start searching through property records and old newspaper archives. In 1960, Martha bought the house from the original owners, the Henderson family. They'd lived here for 40 years without any reports of strange occurrences. So what changed when Martha moved in? I dig deeper into Martha's history. She was a nurse at the local hospital from 1955 to 1985, never married, lived alone, kept to herself. Nothing unusual stands out until I find an article from 1960. It describes a fire at the hospital where Martha worked. 3 people died, including a patient named James Sullivan, who was trapped in his room on the 3rd floor. My heart starts pounding as I read more. Sullivan had been a long time. She watched from the stairs. I think about the figure on my attic steps, the way it always faces down, watching, the heat I feel whenever I get close, the crushing pressure, like someone desperately trying to move, to push through an invisible barrier. The sun is coming up now. In a few hours, I need to call a contractor about the electrical work in the upstairs hallway. Part of me wants to sell the house immediately, to run from whatever entity has attached itself to those stairs. But I keep thinking about Martha's note. I've learned to live with it. She stayed in this house for over 50 years, sharing it with whatever stands on those stairs. Did she feel guilty about not saving Sullivan? Did she understand that his presence wasn't meant to be threatening, but watching, waiting, remembering? I look at the most recent photo I took, the one on my phone. The figure is there, as clear as ever, but in the morning light, it doesn't seem as menacing. It looks patient, like it's been standing guard all these years, keeping vigil on those steps. I get up and walk to my bedroom door. I can hear the house settling, the normal creaks and groans of old wood. But now, there's something else. A feeling I hadn't noticed before. Not fear exactly, more like awareness, acknowledgement. I unlock the door and step into the hallway. The attic stairs are visible at the end of the corridor. I take a deep breath and walk toward them. The heat starts immediately, but I don't fight it this time. The pressure builds between my shoulder blades and I let it come. I stop at the bottom of the stairs and look up. I can't see anything unusual, but I know it's there, watching, waiting. Maybe that's all it's ever done. "Good morning," I say quietly, feeling slightly ridiculous, talking to an empty staircase. "I'm going to be working on the wiring today. I hope that's okay." The pressure on my back eases slightly. The heat fades to a gentle warmth, like sunlight through a window. I take that as a yes. I've been in this house for 6 months now. The renovation is almost complete, but I'm not sure I want to sell anymore. There's something about this place, about the presence that shares it with me. Martha understood that. Maybe that's why she left it to me. I head to the kitchen to make coffee, already planning my work for the day. The stairs creak behind me, but I don't turn around. Some things I'm learning are better left unobserved. Some presences are meant to be felt, not seen. The figure will be there when I pass the stairs again, standing, eternal, watching. The heat will come, and the pressure, and I'll know I'm not alone in this house. It's not exactly comfort, but it's something close to it. A shared vigil, a quiet understanding. I pour my coffee and look out the kitchen window at the rising sun. In a few hours, the contractor will arrive, and I'll have to explain why we need to work around the attic stairs, why that section of the hallway needs to stay exactly as it is. I'm not sure what I'll say. How do you explain sharing your house with a shadow? But that's a problem for later. For now, I sit with my coffee and listen to the old house wake up around me. Somewhere above, on the attic stairs, my unusual housemate keeps its watch. The morning light streams through the windows, and I feel the familiar warmth on my back, constant as a heartbeat, steady as time itself. My hands are still shaking as I type this. I need to get it down while it's fresh in my mind, while I can still remember every detail. It happened 3 hours ago on Route 23, that long stretch of road that cuts through Morrison County. I've driven it hundreds of times, but never like this, never seen anything like this. I was heading home from a late shift at the factory. It was 2:47 a.m. I remember checking my phone at a stop sign, wondering if Sarah would still be awake when I got home. The radio was playing some old country song, turned down low. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the yellow lines that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. The road was empty. It always is at that hour. Just me, my old Ford pickup, and miles of cornfields on either side. The harvest was weeks ago, leaving only dry stalks that rustled in the wind. The moon hung full and bright overhead, casting everything in that weird silver light that makes familiar things look strange. I first noticed something was off when my truck's temperature gauge started dropping. It had been a cool night, maybe 45 degrees, but suddenly the digital readout showed 38, then 35, then 32. My breath started fogging in front of my face. The heater was still running full blast, but it felt like someone had opened all the windows. That's when I saw it, in my peripheral vision. Something moving alongside the road, keeping pace with my truck. I was doing about 50 miles per hour, but whatever it was, it matched my speed. Slowed down to get a better look. The figure slowed too, staying perfectly aligned with my passenger side window. It was running on 2 legs, but the movement was all wrong. The stride was too long, too fluid, like watching someone move underwater, except at highway speeds. My headlights caught it full on when I turned slightly to the right. The figure was tall, maybe 7 feet, but impossibly thin. Its skin looked gray in the headlights, not like human skin, but more like wet clay or rubber. No clothes, no hair, just that smooth uniform surface. Its arms were too long, hanging down past where knees should be, and they didn't swing as it ran. They just trailed behind it, like ribbons in the wind. The head was the worst part. It was elongated, stretched back unnaturally, like it was being pulled by some invisible force. Where a face should have been, there was just smooth, featureless gray. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just that blank, stretched surface, turned toward me as it ran. I hit the gas hard. The engine roared, and my truck lurched forward. The figure kept pace, its legs moving in that impossible fluid motion. At 80 miles per hour, it started to fall behind, but only slightly. That's when it did something I'll never forget. It turned its head, that smooth, featureless head, a full 180 degrees to face me while still running forward. And then it changed direction. In one instant, without slowing down or turning its body, it veered sharply right and disappeared into the woods that lined that stretch of road. I slammed on the brakes. I don't know why. Maybe some primitive part of my brain needed to know that what I'd just seen was real. The truck screeched to a halt, leaving long black marks on the asphalt. I sat there, engine idling, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The temperature gauge started climbing back up. My breath stopped fogging. The night seemed normal again, except for one thing. Where the figure had turned into the woods, there were marks on the road. Not footprints exactly, but depressions in the asphalt, like someone had taken a hot iron and pressed it into the surface, leaving perfect oval shapes in a line leading into the trees. I got out of the truck. I had to see them up close. The marks were about 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. They were deep, maybe 2 inches into the solid asphalt, and the edges were smooth, like they'd been molded. I touched one. It was cold, colder than the air around it. My fingertips went numb almost instantly. The trail of marks led straight into the woods. The trees were thick there, old oaks and maples with heavy branches that blocked out the moonlight. I could see maybe 20 feet in, where the marks continued in that straight line, ignoring trees and undergrowth, just pressing through everything in their path. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. They came out clear. The marks were definitely there, perfectly visible in the flash. I took video, walking along the line of impressions. That's when I heard it, a sound from deep in the woods, like someone dragging something heavy through fallen leaves, but fast, too fast for anything natural. I ran back to my truck. My hands were shaking so bad, I dropped my keys twice before getting them in the ignition. As I pulled away, I kept checking my mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. Just those marks in the asphalt, getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared in the darkness. I drove straight to the police station in Morrison. Officer Jenkins was on duty. I've known him for years. Our kids go to the same school. I showed him the pictures and videos. He listened to my story without interrupting, then made some calls. By sunrise, there were state police and some other officials at the site. They took samples of the marks, measurements, photographs. They asked me the same questions over and over. That was 6 hours ago. They're still out there, from what I hear. Some kind of scientists showed up from the state university. They're analyzing the marks, running tests. Officer Jenkins called an hour ago to tell me they found something strange in the woods. A trail of those same marks, running for miles, straight as an arrow, ignoring all obstacles, trees, rocks, even a small stream. Nothing deflected the path. I'm sitting at my kitchen table now, trying to make sense of it all. Sarah is asleep upstairs. I told her I got held up at work. I haven't decided if I'm going to tell her what really happened. How do you tell someone you saw something that shouldn't exist? The local news is already picking up the story. They're calling it a mysterious vandalism case, or suggesting it might be some kind of elaborate prank. But I know what I saw. That figure running alongside my truck wasn't human, the way it moved, the impossible speed, that blank face. It was something else entirely. I've called in sick to work. I can't face that drive home again. Not yet. Not while I keep seeing that smooth gray head turning to face me in my mind. Not while I remember the way it just changed direction, defying physics and everything I thought I knew about how things move in this world. The police want me to come in later today to make a formal statement. They're bringing in some experts from out of state, they say. People who deal with unusual phenomena. I don't know what to tell them. How do you describe something that shouldn't be possible? I keep checking my phone, looking at the pictures and videos I took. They're still there, still clear as day. The marks in the asphalt, the straight line disappearing into the woods. Proof that it wasn't just my imagination, that something really did run alongside my truck last night at impossible speeds. But there's something else bothering me, something I noticed when I was reviewing the videos earlier. In one of them, when I was filming the marks leading into the woods, there's a frame, just one frame, where something moves in the background. It's blurry and dark, but I can make out that same elongated head, turned at an impossible angle, facing directly at the camera from between two trees. I've tried to convince myself it's just a shadow, or a trick of the light, but I know what I saw, and I know it saw me too. Whatever that thing was, it was aware. It knew I was watching it. And for some reason, it wanted me to see it turn into those woods. The temperature in my kitchen just dropped 10 degrees. The coffee in my mug is starting to frost over. Outside, through my window, I can see the wind has picked up, making the trees sway. But the leaves are moving in the wrong direction, like they're being pulled towards something. I'm going to stop writing now. I need to check all the doors and windows, make sure everything's locked. The sun is up, but somehow, that doesn't make me feel any safer. Not when I know what's out there, running faster than any human could, leaving those impossible marks in its wake. If you're driving on Route 23 late at night, keep your eyes on the road. Don't look to the side if you see movement in your peripheral vision. And whatever you do, don't stop. If you see something running alongside your car, just keep driving as fast as you can until you're somewhere with lights and people and normal things that move the way they're supposed to. Because now, I know we're not alone out here in the dark. There are things that share our world, things that can run alongside our cars on empty rural roads, things that leave marks in solid asphalt, like it's soft clay, things that watch us with faces that aren't faces, moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. I don't know what it was that I saw on Route 23. I don't know if I'll ever know, but I do know one thing. I'm never driving that road at night again. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some mysteries should stay mysteries. The temperature's dropping again. I need to go check the locks one more time. And maybe, just maybe, I'll catch a glimpse of something tall and gray moving through my backyard. Its head turned at an impossible angle, watching me with a face that isn't a face. But this time, I won't stop to take pictures. This time, I'll do what I should have done on that dark road. Keep moving, keep going, and try to forget what I saw. Because some things in this world aren't meant to be seen, aren't meant to be understood. Some things should stay in the shadows, running alongside empty roads in the dead of night, leaving their impossible marks in their wake. The first bump hit at 3:17 a.m. A heavy footstep on old wood, followed by another and another. Someone was walking down the basement stairs in my brother Dave's house. Except Dave was away on business in Seattle, and I was alone in the house. I sat up in the guest bed, my t-shirt sticking to my back. The steps continued, their slow descent. Thump, thump, thump. My phone showed 7 missed calls from my ex-wife and a 12% battery. I'd forgotten to plug it in again. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, a pause. Then they started again from the top. I'd arrived at Dave's place 3 days ago after Karen kicked me out. Third time this year she'd found the empty whiskey bottles I'd hidden in the garage behind the Christmas decorations. Just until I get back on my feet, I told Dave over the phone. He sighed, but said yes. He always did. The footsteps kept their rhythm. Down, pause. Start again from the top. Down, pause. Start again. My hands shook as I pulled on my jeans. The guest room was on the 2nd floor, directly above the kitchen. The basement door was in the kitchen. I knew the layout well. The kitchen was dark. Moonlight cut through the windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. The basement door stood closed, its outline barely visible in the darkness. The footsteps continued their pattern behind it. My throat was dry. I needed a drink. The thought came automatically, followed by the usual wave of shame. Focus. The footsteps were the problem now. Focus on the footsteps. I pressed my ear against the door. The sounds were clearer now. Heavy boots on wooden stairs, moving with mechanical precision. Down. Pause. Start again from the top. The wood didn't creak like it should under that weight. The steps sounded wrong. My phone buzzed. Karen's name lit up the screen. Not now. I declined the call, and my battery dropped to 11%. The door handle was cold against my palm. I tightened my grip on the bat, finding the worn spot where the tape had peeled away. The footsteps continued their rhythm, oblivious or uncaring of my presence. I pulled the door open. The hinges whined. I should have oiled them when Dave asked last year. The basement gaped below, a mouth of absolute darkness that swallowed my phone's weak light. The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed against my ears. I could hear my own breathing, too fast and shallow. Sweat rolled down my back. The air from the basement carried the smell of old wood and concrete dust. Then the footsteps started again, from the top. But I could see the stairs now, illuminated by my phone. They were empty. My light traced the steps. 14 of them. I remembered that from the renovation, each one bare wood, unfinished because Dave kept talking about carpeting them someday. Nothing moved on them, but the footsteps descended. Thump, thump, thump. The sound reached the bottom, paused, and began again from the top. My light showed nothing. The stairs were empty, but someone, or something, was walking down them, over and over and over. I stepped onto the first stair. The wood creaked under my weight, a different sound from the phantom footsteps. Those were heavier, more final. My phone battery dropped to 10%. Another step down. The footsteps continued, their pattern passing through the space where I stood. No temperature change, no brush of movement, just the sound of boots on wood. 3 steps down now. The basement darkness pressed closer. My phone light caught the edges of Dave's workbench at the bottom of the stairs. His tools hung in neat rows on the wall. Everything exactly where it should be. Halfway down now, the footsteps kept their pace, walking through me as they descended. My hands were slick with sweat on the bat and the phone. 9 steps down, 10. The battery warning flashed, 9%. The footsteps reached the bottom again, paused, and started their descent once more. I reached the basement floor. The concrete was cold through my socks. I'd forgotten shoes. My light swept the space. Dave's workshop took up half the basement. Tables lined with projects in various stages of completion. The other half was storage. Boxes of holiday decorations, old furniture, Karen's craft supplies from when she used to visit. The footsteps continued above me now. Down, pause, reset, down, pause, reset. My phone light caught something on Dave's workbench, a paper held down by a hammer. Dave's handwriting, rushed but readable, stared back at me. John, had to leave for Seattle early. Business emergency. Make yourself at home, but don't go in the basement. Really important. I mean it. We'll explain when I get back. Dave. The footsteps kept their rhythm. My phone dimmed to save power. 8% battery. I should have gone back upstairs. Should have called Dave. Should have left the house. Should have done anything except what I did next. But I'd spent 3 years making bad decisions. Why stop now? I moved deeper into the basement. The footsteps continued, their pattern on the stairs behind me. A metronomic rhythm of boots on wood. My light caught more of Dave's workshop. The tools hung perfectly aligned on their hooks, level, measured. Dave had always been the methodical one, but something was different about the tools. I stepped closer. Each tool was secured to its outline on the wall, but the outlines were wrong. A hammer hung where a saw was outlined. A wrench occupied the space marked for a drill. I reached for the hammer. As my fingers touched the handle, the footsteps stopped. The silence hit like a physical thing. My breath sounded too loud in the sudden quiet. The hammer felt wrong in my hand, too light, like it was hollow. I turned the hammer over in my hands, examining it. It was scuffed, worn from use, but something about it felt off. The weight wasn't right. The balance was strange, like it wasn't meant to be swung. I set it down and stepped back from the workbench. The footsteps hadn't resumed. The silence pressed in, heavy and unnatural. I felt like the basement walls were leaning closer, the shadows stretching toward me. The air smelled sharper now, like metal and damp earth. I took a cautious step toward the stairs, my light shaking as I aimed it at the steps. They were still empty, no movement, no sound, but the pressure on my chest was almost unbearable, as if the air itself was trying to force me to stay. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped, nearly dropping it. Karen again. I ignored the call and my battery dropped to 6%. No time for this, I muttered, trying to steady my breathing. I started up the stairs, one slow step at a time. The wood creaked loudly beneath me, a stark contrast to the earlier phantom steps. It felt like the noise echoed too long, lingering in the air like a bad memory. Halfway up, the footsteps started again, not behind me, above me. They weren't coming down the stairs. They were moving through the kitchen, pacing back and forth, heavy and deliberate. I froze, gripping the railing tightly. The bat felt useless in my hand. What was I supposed to do? Swing at something I couldn't see? The pacing stopped. Then, a slow, steady creak as the basement door began to close. I panicked, lunging up the last few steps and slamming my shoulder into the door before it could shut completely. The impact rattled through me, but the door stopped moving. I shoved it open, stumbling into the kitchen. Nothing was there. The room was exactly as I'd left it, the moonlight streaming through the windows, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the faintly scuffed linoleum beneath my feet. I stood there, gasping for air, the bat hanging limply at my side. And then the footsteps resumed. This time, they were coming from the hallway, moving toward me. I swung the bat wildly, the air whistling around me as I aimed at nothing. "Stop it," I yelled, my voice breaking. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the house was deathly silent. No creaks, no hums, no sounds at all. Even my breathing seemed muted, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then came the voice, low, raspy and guttural. It whispered from somewhere in the darkness. "Why are you here?" I froze, my heart hammering so loudly it drowned out everything else. The bat slipped from my sweaty hands and clattered to the floor. "Leave me alone," I shouted, backing away toward the front door. The voice didn't respond, but the air seemed to thicken around me, like I was moving through molasses. My vision blurred, the edges of the room smearing together into indistinct shapes. I fumbled for the door handle, finally managing to twist it and stumble out onto the porch. The cold night air hit me like a slap, clearing my head. I turned and slammed the door behind me, locking it with trembling hands. The house loomed in the moonlight, its dark windows staring back at me like vacant eyes. I didn't care. I wasn't going back inside, not that night. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked at the edge of the driveway. The bat sat on the passenger seat, and I kept my phone clutched in my hand, watching the battery slowly drain to 3%, then 2%. I didn't sleep. Every shadow that moved in the trees, every gust of wind, sent chills down my spine. When the sun finally rose, I felt a faint sense of relief. The house didn't look as menacing in the daylight, but I still couldn't shake the memory of that voice. I decided to call Dave. He picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy and annoyed. "John, it's 6 a.m. What's going on? What the hell is wrong with your house?" I demanded, my voice shaking. There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb, Dave. You told me not to go in the basement. Why? What's down there?" Dave sighed heavily. "I was hoping you wouldn't have to deal with that," he said finally. "Deal with what?" "Look, I don't know what it is, okay? It's been there ever since I bought the place. At first it was just noises, footsteps, doors creaking, stuff like that. But then it started getting worse." "Worse how?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "Things would move on their own, lights would flicker. I'd hear voices sometimes, like someone whispering right in my ear. I tried everything, priests, psychics, you name it. Nothing worked. So you just live with it." "I didn't have a choice. It doesn't hurt anyone. It just exists. I figured if I left it alone, it would leave me alone." "Well, it's not leaving me alone," I snapped. "I'm sorry, John," Dave said quietly.